friends, it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel. I'm super excited about today's video because I'm going to share with you one of my favorite things to do, which is create affordable but beautiful home decor. Today we're going to be creating some items that I'm going to use on my coffee bar, and as you can see, it's bumblebee themed. I've created anything from little bumblebees to beehives and a honey pot and a beautiful garland, and I can't wait to share it with you. It's gonna be a long video, so grab a cup of coffee, sit back and relax, and I hope you get inspired to decorate and create a few things for your home. So let's get started on the first DIY, which is gonna be a sign that's gonna go at the top of my coffee bar. Here it is. I bought this a few years ago at an antique store, and I've never used it, and I wanted to give it a makeover for this coffee bar, and I'm going to be giving it that galvanized look to kind of go with the farmhouse style, and I just showed you there. I'm going to use Waverly chalk paint in the color Elephant, and I'm going to give it a good coat. And I'm only doing this on the top of the sign where you can see it's kind of that golden color. When you get down to the red, we're going to do a different color down there. But I start by giving it this good base coat. And anytime you're doing a galvanized look, you need a really good dull gray for those undertones coming through the more metallic top coat that we're going to do here in just a few minutes. But I'm not being very precise about this at all. I am using this foam brush, and I'm just applying it in this pouncing motion. And I'm doing this in order to avoid any type of brush marks. I don't want to see any of that. I want it to look authentic. And if you've got brush marks in it, it's not going to look like galvanized metal. So I just continue this until this entire piece is covered on top. And then also, I won't be showing you, but I also do this exact same process on the coffee mug that you see at the bottom of the sign. The only thing that I don't cover is where there is supposed to be coffee in that mug. It's nice and brown, and I wanted to leave that so that it looked still very much like coffee. And so that whole mug will be galvanized as well, and then there's two little cookies on the side, and we're going to galvanize those. But as you can see, I am getting this all covered, and what we want to do is leave some of that almost rust color coming through, especially around the letters there where it says special blend. This will help those letters to kind of pop out, but later on we're going to go back and add some rust. And so here you can see what that looks like when I've got that all painted. And so here is a close-up of it so that you can see the next step, which is to add this metallic tempera paint. This is just what I had on hand. Any kind of silver metallic paint will work, and I'm using a smaller foam brush here to apply the paint, and I'm doing that same motion, that pouncing, stippling motion, whatever you want to call it, to apply the paint again, so that we don't have brush strokes. You don't want that, so make sure you're using a foam brush. And then I'm also using kind of the corner of that brush and not that straight flat edge. If you use that entire edge, it will leave these lines all in it, and you don't want that. So I like that corner, the dimension that leaves on there. I think it looks more realistic. So we're going to continue doing this throughout the entire piece, at least where we want it to look galvanized. And we do this also on that coffee mug down below. Next, you're going to see I have painted the bottom already, and I made a couple of mistakes. One, I ended up not liking the color. I used Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster, and it just appeared to be too yellow, and I didn't like that. So I'm going to go back over it with Waverly chalk paint in the color White, and it really lightens it up and gets rid of that yellow tone. But the other thing that I did wrong to start with was I used a regular paintbrush. I thought that would be the way to go, but it just wasn't. So I'm going back in with this Waverly white chalk paint and this flat round brush and using that same pouncing motion that I've done on the rest of it, and it worked out beautifully. And what I wanted to do was cover up those brush strokes, and that's the beauty of using chalk paint. It's super thick and it is great at covering up mistakes or any flaws in your piece. So I cover this entire part on the bottom that I want white and let that dry fully before moving on to the next step. Next, I'm going to be giving the sign a rusted, aged look by using some paint. And I'm going to be using this folk art paint in the color Burnt Umber. And I wanted to show you guys, I just showed you the sticker there. I actually got this on the clearance aisle at Walmart for 10 cents. So always check that out for some great deals on crafting supplies. But again, I'm using the color Burnt Umber, and it's great for creating the appearance of rust. And so how I'm doing that is I'm going to go in and use this small brush, and I'm going to start by going around the letters. Now, I'm not going to cover the edges of the letters entirely, but I'm going to go in with just a little dab of paint and give it some dimension by adding the rust, and this will also help these letters kind of stand out better, and this just adds to what we've left there from the original color. It makes that really pop. And then next I'm going to go in on places on the sign where it would naturally rust, like those edges there that you see, the corners and all of those kinds of places. And what I'm doing here is I'm using this small brush and a fairly small amount of paint. And I am going along those edges, and then I'm coming back with a paper towel if I feel like the line is too harsh, and softening that up a bit. You don't want really distinct lines because that's not going to look realistic, and that's not how a metal piece would rust. So you don't want it to be a straight line. You kind of want it to be jagged, and you can almost give it this dry brush effect like you do on many other things, and that really helps to make it look more realistic. And now here I'm coming back and adding a little extra paint in this corner because I felt like it just wasn't standing out enough. And that's another tip. Anytime you are giving something a specific effect, you start out with a little bit of paint and build on that because it's much easier to add to than to take away. So next you can see I have moved on down to the white part of the sign. And so I was a little bit nervous here applying it because it looked so much more bold than it did on the galvanized part of the sign. But it worked out beautifully, and I honestly like the bottom part as far as the rest is concerned better than I do the top part. It looks, especially in person, it looks so realistic. But again, I'm doing the same thing. I'm going along the edges and places that it would naturally rust, and if I feel like my lines are too harsh, then I'm going back in with that paper towel and kind of smudging the paint around and dabbing some of it off. And you can see here again I'm using kind of that dry brushing technique where I have just a little bit of paint on there and I'm kind of just smudging it around, and it makes it look more like actually how rust would appear. And then I'm going to go in along the edge there where the metal part meets the white part, because that line is certainly not perfect and some of that original color is showing through, but that is perfectly fine because we go back in with this rust color and kind of make that look deliberate and make it look like it's actually rust. And in person, I don't know how it's going to come across on camera, but in person the sign looks like it is truly rusted. I was so pleased with how that came out. You can see here, that's where I'm going along the edge, and certainly I'm not doing straight lines. I'm kind of coming off and making some places wider than others. And of course, if you think about how something rusts, that is exactly what it does. Now, what you don't see in the video, and I apologize for that, I don't show where I gave the coffee mug that same look, but I did the same thing to it. And here it is hanging on my coffee bar, and I love how it turned out. So now on to the next DIY. We're going to be making some beehives or beescapes, whatever you want to call them. So these small ones that we're going to make is going to be for a garland. I'm going to hang on the coffee bar. And I am going to use this medium-sized Easter egg left over from my kids' Easter baskets, some jute cording I got at Walmart, of course a glue gun, and we are going to glue this onto the Easter egg. And then I'm showing you there, you're also going to need some black chalk paint or acrylic paint, whatever you want to do to make sure that that looks like there is a hole there, and give it that appearance. And then of course you're going to need a paintbrush. And then we're going to need a lighter, and I'm going to show you what we're going to do with that here in just a few minutes. So how I'm going to start is there is like an indentation on the bottom of the Easter egg. And so that is a great starting point to add your first bit of glue and start adding your jute string. Now, doing this, it is going to be a lifesaver to have these. I got these at the Dollar Tree. They come in a pack of 3. They are finger protectors, and they work beautifully when working with hot glue and probably for sewing and things of that nature as well. But I love them when I'm hot gluing. So I put a little dab of glue right on that indentation on the bottom of the Easter egg, and then I just hold that on until it sets up just slightly. Then I begin to twist it around in making kind of a circular shape there on the very bottom of the Easter egg. And I continue to do this and adding glue as I go all the way up the egg. And you see here I'm kind of stopping and I'm molding it to get it started. I want to make sure that it's a good circular shape on the bottom, and that will kind of guide me for the rest of the process on the egg. You would also do this if you're making another style beehive, which I will show you here in a few minutes, the other style beehive that I did using a totally different kind of product. But I've seen all kinds of people here on YouTube showing you how to make these. They are super easy. It is really a relaxing, fun activity. I really enjoyed making these, and I hope that you will give it a shot too. But again, adding glue as I go and winding it around. It can't get any easier than that, you guys. Now, what I failed to show you, and I apologize for this, my camera had died, I didn't get footage of it, but once you get to the top of the Easter egg, you're going to want to create a loop. And so you want to stop maybe a half an inch or so from the top of the Easter egg and create your loop. And you're going to use just a short amount of string, as long as you want your loop to be, and loop it around and glue it to the Easter egg, and then you're going to continue gluing your jute string over the top of that all the way till you get to the very top of the Easter egg. Now I'm going to show you what we're going to do with the slider. So I've seen lots of people do this on YouTube. It is quite intimidating, but don't be afraid. We are going to get rid of all of these little fibers and things sticking out all over the beehive. And so any large pieces I just snip away with my scissors, and then I'm going to light up the rest of them. We're going to singe all of those off, and you can see it kind of lighting up here. And just be sure you are holding your fingers away from it. It does create a little bit of a smell, but it's not terrible by any means. It was pretty satisfying, to be honest, even though I was super nervous about it. But it makes a huge difference in the way that these beehives look. So definitely give that a try. Now I'm going to show you, this is the second one that I made. And it's much larger, obviously, than those that I'm going to be hanging, that I created with the Easter eggs. So for this one, I used some Dollar Tree products as well. But I created it the exact same way, but I used these, I guess they're flower pots from the Dollar Tree. They come in a pack of 3, and they have just a really nice shape, I feel like, for the beehive. And then the top was flat, and so I wanted it to have a more rounded edge. And so I took the bottom part of the Easter egg and, of course, separated it from the top, and then applied a little bit of hot glue around that rim of it, and then just applied it to the top of the flower pot, and it worked out great. And don't worry about that coming apart, because once you attach all of the jute string, it really strengthens the whole thing and holds together beautifully. So again, you create it the exact same way that we did the ones that we just looked at. But now I'm going to show you how to create the front piece. And I apologize, I did not do that before. But again, my camera had quit filming and I just didn't realize it, so I apologize. But for this one, for the larger one, I'm going to be using some of that Dollar Tree nautical rope. I wanted it to be a little bit thicker, but of course, if you don't have this, don't worry. You can use just your regular jute cording and wrap it around several times. But if you're using this nautical rope, I'm going to determine what size circle that I want, and then cut that length off. And then I'm just going to apply some hot glue to the end, just like that. And then I'm going to hold the other end to it until the glue kind of sets up and hardens. And then you will have your circle. Now, to attach that circle to the beehive, you are just simply going to apply a ring of hot glue around there, and then place it on the beehive where you want it to go. And you may have to hold it there for a second until the glue kind of sets up, but after that, you're good to go. And the only other step left is to paint the inside of it or color it in with something. So of course you can use chalk paint, you can use black craft paint. Also, if you would rather, most of us have markers or Sharpies or something laying around. You could definitely use a black Sharpie or marker if that's what you want. Paint pens work well also. You can even get those at the Dollar Tree. That one that I have there came from Michael's. You could also use felt instead of any kind of paint or anything if you have that on hand. So now we're going to move on to the next DIY. And we're going to be making a kink stand, a riser, whatever you want to call it. But I'm going to use this wood piece that I got in a pack of 3 from Michael's. I've had it for a while, but I believe they still have them. The bottom piece I got from the Dollar Tree. It's one of those gold metal baskets that they have. They have square ones and they have round ones. So I took this round basket, spray painted it black, and then after it was dry, I just used some Gorilla Hot Glue because it holds the best. A generous amount on the bottom, making sure it coats the metal parts of the basket so that those are sturdy and will stick to the top. So for less than $5, you have a really high-end pedestal or cake stand that is great for decorating. Now before we move on to our next DIY, let's take a look at these displayed. Next up, we're going to make a garland using Dollar Tree products. And we're going to hang those Beescapes on there that we made earlier from the Easter eggs. So let's get started. I'm going to start though with this wired sort of garland that they had at the Dollar Tree back around Christmas time. I bought several of these and I've used them for different things, but it's wired and it has these little pearl looking beads on there. They are almost to look like the pitberry garlands, and I really like the look of that, and I think that would give me a good base to attach my flowers to. It is 9 feet long, which is way longer than I need to, so I think I'm going to almost double up on it, and I'll show you how I'm going to do that in a second. The flowers I have in mind for up there, of course, I really feel like I need some yellow since we are doing bees in spring and summer. And so I got this pick from the Dollar Tree, and I've already removed my tag. I wish I knew what it was called, but I really like these cute flowers. I think they're a really good size for this small garland and won't be too overpowering. I'm also thinking of using a little bit of purple, and so this came from Walmart, and it's a lavender pick, if you can see. Sorry, I know there is a glare. Anyway, it's lavender. The camera will not focus. Anyways, lavender. Maybe you can see it there. And I think these were just a little over $1 at Walmart. They may have been 97 cents. So, but not much. And then Dollar Tree is also carrying these. I actually purchased these last year, but I did see that they had them again this year. And I really like these. They have this really neat texture to the leaves, much like lamb's ear. That's kind of what it reminds me of. But I really like it. It has that lavender look and then the really nice soft green. And then I also have these larger ones. They're called Cosmos. They came from the Dollar Tree as well. And they are yellow and are similar to those other flowers. And then I also have some sunflowers that I may use, but I feel like they're going to be a little too overpowering for it. And then, of course, we are going to be attaching these mini beehives that I made that you just saw. And then to do that, I'm going to tie them on with some jute string. To attach the flowers, I'm thinking I'm going to use this floral tape. We'll see how that goes. I've never used floral tape, so we'll see. I got that at the Dollar Tree as well. I'm probably going to need some scissors and some wire cutters of some sort, and possibly a glue gun. I do have my hot glue gun plugged in case I need it. To get started with this garland, I took this this beaded garland, I guess, and I folded it in half, and I made like a little crease in it where I would know or have a stopping point for my flowers, and that way I wouldn't make it longer than it needed to be. And then I started with determining the look that I wanted and cutting my flowers apart. You can see here, I'm just kind of looking at things and cutting apart all of the flowers. Now on the lavender pieces, I decided not to cut them apart, but I just pulled them off so that if I didn't use them, I could pop them back on there and reuse this somewhere else. And then I also did that exact same thing with the Cosmos flowers that I got from the Dollar Tree. I did end up cutting these other greenery pieces from the Dollar Tree because they did not pull apart. And then I started with my hot glue gun. And the reason I had this hot glue gun, because before this, I had pulled out this tape, this floral tape, and it's not sticky. So if anybody has any tricks on how to use this stuff, if that's normal or if there's something wrong with this piece, let me know in the comments down below, because it did not work. However, I made it work and used a little dab of hot glue with it. Well, you can see here that I'm taking the flowers and just trying to determine how exactly I wanted to do this and which pieces worked. And when it was all said and done, those lamb's ear style greenery pieces from the Dollar Tree looked just too heavy for this garland, and I ended up not using them. But I took the greenery off of those other flowers and used that as the greenery pieces on here, and it turned out great. So you can see here I'm struggling with this tape and trying to figure out how to make this work, but and then trying to also determine what I wanted my flowers to look like and which order I wanted them to go in and what was going to be the best way to apply them. So I wanted there to be kind of this wildflower appearance of them, and I wanted these purple lavender pieces to be kind of dispersed periodically throughout the entire garland. And so trying to figure out where to place those and how to adhere them was a little bit challenging, but I got it figured out. And as you can see here, I start putting some of it on with this floral tape, and that was killing me. And then I just added a little hot glue to get it to stick, and we made it work. And I continued this process throughout the rest of the garland. Now you can see here I have finally figured out how I wanted this to look, and I'm showing you exactly how I've put it together. And so I take that longer piece with multiple flowers, and I attach the larger cosmos flower to it, as well as one of the sides of the purple lavender piece. Like I said, they kind of are in a V shape, and so I only attach one side of it to the garland itself, and that way one piece can kind of stick out and it looks a little more natural that way, like it's growing on a vine or something. And then I just wrap it with floral tape and add a little hot glue, and that is it, you guys. Now it's time to hang the garland on my coffee bar. And to hold the shelving up, I have these brackets that kind of stick out past the shelving, so it's great for attaching garlands or hanging something from it. And all I'm doing is using some jute cord, and I'm wrapping it around there and tying it in a knot, and as simple as that. And the garland stays perfectly. Next, I'm going to go on and I'm going to kind of determine where I want these 3 miniature beehives beehives or beescapes, whatever you want to call them. And of course I want to place them evenly on the garland, and so one in the middle and one on each side of it. And then all I do is use some more jute cord and tie them on there. Now when you go on to tie this Beescape, you want to make sure that you're turning it where it will face forward. You see I switched it because had I left it the other direction, we would have seen the back side of the Beescape and we wouldn't have been able to see the faux opening on the front. And so you want to make sure you see that, so or else you'll have to just untie it and do it again, which sometimes can be challenging with jute cord. You may have to cut it and then start over, but that would be okay too. So once I have that one in place, I go in and tie on the next one, and again all I'm doing is just tying it around in a knot. It is as simple as that. And then I do the other side. I love how this garland turned out. So now let's move on to making some of those cute little bees that you've seen in some of the displays. We're going to do this by using a salt dough recipe. And I went on Pinterest and found a salt dough recipe. It is super simple and you just use things from your kitchen. So you need flour, salt, and warm water. And that is it. So you're going to make a dough just like you would with cookies or bread or anything like that. So you're going to start by, I put the salt in first. It doesn't matter which one you do first. And I will link this recipe down below, or if I can't find it again, I will just type the recipe down below. That way if you want to make anything out of salt dough, you can. Now, certainly you can make anything at all. This is great for making faux cookies, Christmas ornaments, all sorts of things. But we're going to do something a little bit different that I've not ever seen anybody do. I'm sure that they have, but I've never seen it. And we are going to be using some ice cube molds, and I'll show you those in a second. But you mix all the ingredients, and then you get a consistency like this. Then you're going to take it out of the bowl and knead it, and you're going to knead that for about 5 minutes. And I've put a little bit of flour so that it does not stick to my kitchen counter. And you can see my kids got involved. They had so much fun doing this that day, and we made faux cookies, and then we also made these little bees and a few other things as well. And this works great, and you will see that in a second. And when these are all done, they are really hard. So this is what you get after you knead it for 5 minutes. And I'm going to show you next, we're going to use these, they're ice cube trays. And they're molded into different shapes. And so a couple of these, the yellow ones came from Walmart, and the blue one came from the Dollar Tree. And of course the one from the Dollar Tree is $1, but the ones from Walmart I think were just under $2. So it's still a really good value. And all we did is we take the pieces of the salt dough and we press it in there until it is pressed in there really nicely, and we take off some of the excess so that it can be flat. And then they didn't want to come out of there without messing up the mold because they were still soft. So I thought, well, it's a nice tray. We're going to freeze them. So I stuck them in my freezer, and I left them in there actually overnight. And then the next day, I just popped them out onto a cookie sheet and set my oven to 200 degrees. And once it was at 200 degrees, I popped them in the oven and let them bake for about 2 hours. Then I also let them cool for a couple of hours on the counter, and they were hard as rocks, honestly. And this is what they look like when they come out. So, and you can see that mold really left some nice indentions and a nice shape to it where you can tell that it's a bumblebee. And so we're going to use some paint. We're going to use some yellow craft paint from Craftsmart, and then I have this white paint from Folk Art. I think it's titanium white. And then also we're going to need some black craft paint as well. Any craft paint will do, of course. And I don't show you here, you're also going to need some gray, but you'll see that in a second. And then you want to seal them. If you want to make them last a while, you can use some Mod Podge to seal those once that paint has completely dried. And you can use the matte or you can use the gloss. And the gloss will give it a much higher shine if that's what you want. On these, I actually used the matte Mod Podge. But I also have this brush, and it is a flat paintbrush, and it's pretty narrow. It's just the perfect size for the stripes on the bumblebee. And then to add some details, we're going to use this really tiny brush, as you can see there. But that will be for very little of the project. But for most of it, we're going to use that flat brush. And I find that painting with flat brushes, squared off brushes, work great. Now, I'm showing you a little trick here. This is actually the backing to that clear contact paper that I use for my Cricut for transfer tape. And the paper has like this waxy finish. And so I have found that that works great for painting. And when whatever it is I'm painting, when it dries, it won't stick to the paper because of that waxy finish. So if you don't have this, you could certainly get some wax paper. It would work just as well. But I find if I paint on brown craft paper or something like that, when that paint dries, it sticks to it and it rips the paper, and then I have to try to figure out how to get the paper off, and this has alleviated all of that. So now I'm going to put out just little dabs of paint onto my wax paper, and it takes very little paint for these. Honestly, what you see here is probably enough paint for 3 bumblebees. So these are really, really cost effective. I mean, they only cost cents to make, seriously. I'm having trouble with my paint flaking there, as you can see. But we're going to use, of course, the yellow, the black. We're going to use white. You will see that in a second. And then also the gray. And there's that white paint. And the gray paint. Once you have all of your paint, you want to get that flat paintbrush, and you can either start, for me, I like to start with the yellow and then work my way into the black. So I go in with the parts, and I predetermine this, where I want the yellow to go. And if you have trouble visioning where the yellow and the black and the white and all that should go, I would pull up pictures on Pinterest or just Google images of painted bees, and you can kind of see yourself. But go in, and with this brush, it is just the right size for this particular bee. For those stripes, and I just go in with the yellow paint and this flat brush, and I create some stripes for the look of the bee, and it's really simple because the outline is there for you. So one thing I do find is that craft paint is pretty thin, and it may require a couple of coats, and you will see me going over these a couple of times, and sometimes even after they dry I go over them again and add a little more paint, because you could see the dough kind of through the paint in some places. So while I let that yellow dry, I'm gonna go in and paint the white and paint the wings in there, and that is super simple. I just paint the white all over the entire wing, and then after that's dry, we will go back in and add some details with that gray paint, which you will see in just a few moments. Now that I have the wings painted and the yellow paint is pretty much dry, and guys, this was done immediately after I painted the wings. This paint dries super fast, I guess because it is so thin, so there's not a lot of wait time here, which is kind of nice. That's one of the most frustrating things for me when crafting is having to wait on paint to dry. I think I'm going to have to invest in one of those heat guns. So if you have one of those, that might be helpful here. But it dries really quickly, so you probably would not need to use it. So I'm just going in between those yellow lines and creating black lines in the same way. And then I come around the front, and there's kind of some indentions on this that kind of is a guide for where his eyes should go, or where they would be if he was an actual bee. So it makes it super easy for you. Now I'm going to go in with that really small brush, and I'm cleaning my brushes here, you guys, that's what I'm doing. I'm going to go in with that detail brush and a little bit of gray paint and create some details. This also is indented in them. If you get it down in there really well, they show up better. So some of the lines are there better than others, but you can see how that turned out. It was so easy. Now, up next, we are going to create a honey jar or a honey pot using this Dollar Tree container. It's a glass container, and it comes with this lid. And all I did was take it outside, spray paint it with some high gloss white paint. And then we're going to go in with some craft paint and make it look like it is dripping with honey. Like it's been used and we've dripped honey all over it. And you know that this happens if you've ever had an actual honey jar. It really does, and it's a sticky mess. But this one's not going to be because it's paint. Creating this was really fun for me. And I'm going to start by adding just a little bit of brown paint in with the yellow to kind of tone that yellow down to give it more of a honey appearance. Although this yellow ends up still being pretty bright, but it does tone it down quite a bit so that it doesn't just stand out and look really unrealistic. So how I do this is I go in and paint around the rim of the glass container, and then as I'm going I create what would look like drips, and you can see I'm doing that here. So I'm going in and I'm going to apply some paint and I'm making this on the bottom very uneven lines. You don't want it to be a straight line. You want it to look natural. And honey, of course, is not going to drip in a perfectly straight line. It's not going to be even. So you want to make sure that it's not. And on the drips, you want to come down and almost puddle the paint at the bottom, if that makes sense, so that it is a little bit wider at the bottom of the drip than it is just above it. And it will look like the honey is puddled up there on the end, just like if it was dripping, if you think about what a drip looks like. So I continue to do this all the way around the jar and making sure that I'm not creating any sort of pattern here. And that's easy to do, I think, when you're painting. You think, oh, I need a drip here and a drip there. And for me, I will create a pattern without even knowing it. So I had to consciously say, no, that looks too much like what I've already done. Let's do something slightly different. And so just creating uneven lines and going all the way around. And making it look like honey has come out all the way around the pot. Now, one thing is painting on glass is not always easy, and your paint tends to slide around a little bit. So it might be necessary once this dries to go back and give it another coat and trying to follow the lines that you've already created there with your yellow paint. And I had to do this, especially in some places where you could kind of still see the white peeping through there, and that was not what I certainly wanted. Now, I will tell you, I don't show this on here. When I put the lid back on this container, it looked strange. Like the lid needed some yellow on it. There was almost like a white line there, and it looked really unnatural. So I go back on the lid and do kind of the same thing, except I don't create any drips. I just make some uneven paint lines around the top of the lid, and you'll see that in a second. Now, I went in with my Cricut and I cut out a decal that just said honey, and I used the font that is Ray Dunn inspired, of course. And I also rolled up some kitchen towels and placed them in a pasta bowl so that my honey jar would stay in place while I was trying to apply this decal. So and then I discovered that I did not want that to stick because I was afraid it was going to pull off my paint. So I just went in with my finger and pressed it down and then pulled it right off. And then I went in and pushed down on the decal again to make sure that it was good and stuck. And there is how it turned out. I think it's super cute. I love it. Now let's take another look at the items that we DIY'd today. That is going to wrap up another video. I thank you so much for joining me today and sticking in here with me through this entire video. I hope that you enjoyed it, and if you did, please be sure to give me a big thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. It sure does help my channel to grow, and it also helps me to continue to bring you lots of inspiration and DIY projects. And I hope that you will join me again, and I will catch you in the next one.